This is a monumental step forward. It's no longer if there's going to be a vaccine, it's when.
The UK is the first country in the world to have given the go-ahead for this vaccine. 800,000 doses are expected to arrive in UK distribution warehouses from Belgium by this weekend. That will then scale up to the 40 million doses the UK has bought, enough for 20 million people. It's a huge logistical challenge. So what do we know about the plans? Today we learnt more about how the vaccine is stored and transported, the so-called cold chain process. It's kept in ultra-low freezer units at -70 degrees and can be stored here for up to 6 months. But it'll be transported in what Pfizer called thermal shippers, essentially pizza boxes packed with dry ice. Each tray inside can hold up to 1,000 vaccines, with 5 trays in each shipper. These will be tracked from Belgium into the UK using GPS-enabled temperature sensors to ensure the low temperatures. But crucially, Pfizer says the vaccine can be stored at a normal fridge temperature of 2 to 8 degrees for up to 5 days, making it easier for the NHS to administer.
Although we are the first health service in the world to be able to get vaccinating, supplies from the manufacturer are phased. So the initial tranche in December is going to enable us to get started, but the bulk of this vaccination programme, either through this vaccine or hopefully others as well that will join it, will take place in the period January through to March or April for the at-risk population.
The JCVI, the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, said today the best option is to target people most at risk of morbidity and mortality. From next week in England, 50 so-called hospital hubs will start the process. Scotland will begin with health and care staff from Tuesday. In England, although over 80s and care home staff will be prioritised, it's understood at first that will only be those going into hospital for an outpatient appointment. For now, this vaccine won't be going straight into care homes, even though care home regulators and staff are at the very top of the priority list for vaccination. That's because the regulator hasn't yet approved splitting up the contents of those trays that hold 975 doses into smaller, more manageable numbers.
As soon as it is legally and technically possible to get the vaccine into care homes, we will do so. But, you know, this is a complex product with a very fragile cold chain. It's not a yoghurt that can be taken out of the fridge and put back in multiple times. It's really tricky to handle.
With more than 400,000 people living in UK care homes and hit so hard in the pandemic, it's not what they wanted to hear.
We've been working on the expectation that homes would be getting the tests and care home residents and care home staff would be getting the vaccine as soon as those are available. That's been the working assumption since the publication of the JCVI priority list back in September. So it's pretty disappointing to hear today that the plan for rollout doesn't actually enable that to happen.
When it comes to rollout, GPs are to be the next step in what's likely to be the biggest vaccination programme ever. They'll start operating local centres across England, inviting in at-risk patients for a jab, then a booster 3 weeks later. Those over 80 and frontline health and social care staff are second on the priority list.
For practices like ours, we're used to doing it. We're doing it at the moment with flu vaccinations, so it's not a big problem, except to do with fridges and temperatures. That's an issue. But we think we can get around that without too much problem. We are already talking in our area, so this is the East End of London, 400,000 population, probably having one main centre where we vaccinate from the general practice perspective.
None of this is mandatory. To reach immunity, people will need to want to take up the offer. The European Medicines Agency appeared to criticise its British counterpart today, saying it won't authorise Pfizer's vaccine until it's got more evidence and done more checks. Being first isn't always a good sell.
When it comes to medicines where people quite naturally have concerns about potential safety issues, that's not always a good thing. So I think the government's going to, and the medical authorities are going to have to work very hard to make sure that the public is reassured around the safety and efficacy of this drug.
As the vaccine rollout spreads across the country, expect a widespread campaign of information and persuasion over the coming months.
Katie Razzle, and Katie's with me now. And we've heard on a sort of similar area, Katie, but slightly different, about university students and how they're going to have to stagger their returns. Tell us more.
Well, yes, Emily, the government's announced more detail on what we were reporting earlier this week, if you remember. And they're saying that, yes, student return to English universities will be staggered over 5 weeks after Christmas, and that they'll be offered rapid COVID testing by the universities that have already offered that to them for leaving. To leave, they'll be offered that on their return. The Department for Education is also saying that students who go home to Tier 3 areas where mass testing's on offer should take up a test before they come back to university, and that's obviously to try and stop the scenes that we saw in October with all those spikes in cases and students self-isolating. I've heard that there was quite a lot of tough lobbying by universities with more students who do the kind of courses, social work, nursing, medicine, those kind of courses where you need in-person teaching, you need placements. And that lobbying worked. They've won. So they're coming back first. They're allowed back to take up those offers of placements and all of that. They get to come back between January the 4th and January the 18th, whereas all other students will have learning only online, and they have a travel window between the 25th of January and the 7th of February. So another start for many of them to an abnormal term in these abnormal times.
Goodness. Katie, thanks very much indeed. So what then do we know of the way the vaccine actually works, and how quickly will other countries reach their own regulatory sign-off? Earlier I spoke to Sean Marrett of the company behind it, BioNTech. He of the 1 a.m. email this morning, and asked him whether we should be worried that the UK is the first country to give its approval.
There is no question in our minds that the depth of questions we've received, and we are the marketing authorization holder, BioNTech, meaning that we get to interact directly with the UK regulatory authorities, that the UK have asked us some very, very deep questions about our vaccine before approving it.
And the significance of that is what? That you feel they have been as rigorous as they possibly could at checking?
I can tell you, in many jurisdictions we own the product, and so we deal with the regulators directly. And from what we have dealing with the UK and other regulators, there is absolutely no difference in the depth of questions that they ask. And they ask 3 questions. The first one is, does this look like it's going to help protect the population against COVID? The second is this sufficiently tolerated to be given to the British people? And the third is, does this company, or in this case, does this company with its partner, manufacture this product to the highest quality consistency each time? And those are the questions we've had to answer highly scientifically and in a rigorous manner.
You're a German company and you're speaking to us from Germany. What's been the reaction there in Germany that actually the UK will get this first?
I think that if you look at the expectations around regulatory approval, in Europe we expect that this month, if all goes well. In the United States we expect that this month. So I think in terms of a couple of weeks here and there, I don't really think that makes a difference. However, where it does make a difference is that, of course, the UK can go ahead now as the first country to start vaccinating its population. And for me, I have a really specific interest in the UK, and that our kids are here, and my parents are in the over 80s bracket, and until they get vaccinated, we can't see them.
This vaccine works differently to any other vaccine that's been approved, the mRNA, the way it's used. Just explain to us what that is.
So mRNA stands for messenger RNA, and it's a messaging molecule. We have billions of copies of this in our body, messenger RNA, and all we have done is we've taken that message and adapted it to instruct the immune system to watch out for virus, and if a virus infects, destroy it.
And we know that the vaccine protects you, but you might still spread it. Is that right? You could still get infected with COVID, it just wouldn't make you ill?
Yeah, so we cannot answer that question yet. What we can answer is the question, what sort of protection do we see? And protection is defined as, in our clinical trial of 43,000 folks, do you get symptoms of COVID or not on our vaccine versus a placebo arm? And the answer is, in 95% of cases, you do not, on this vaccine, get symptoms of the virus. And that's true for all age groups, elderly, over 65s, through down to 18-year-olds. Now, does that mean that we don't spread it? That's for further scientific analysis. We cannot say yet.
So if I have the 2 doses of the vaccine, could I hug a friend straight after, or could I still be passing on COVID?
Well, what we've shown is that you yourself will be protected 7 days after the 2nd dose. As to whether you would spread it, it's unlikely, we would say, but we have no evidence to suggest that you would not spread it. I think it's just simply too premature to be able to address that very important scientific question.
And will your Christmas celebrations be even bigger for you because of this, or do you think you'll be even more cautious? You won't presumably be coming over here to hug your parents yet.
No, I think that, I think, of course, we would love to come, but I think you've got to wait 28 days from first injection to make sure that, according to our clinical trial, you're covered. And so, unfortunately, we're going to miss Christmas in the UK this year. But what we can say is that providing my parents get vaccinated over the next few months, we can come for Easter, and that will really please the grandchildren here.
John Barrett, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, let's take some of those thoughts a little bit further. Joining us now, Professor John Edmonds, the epidemiologist who sits on the SAGE advisory body, Professor Anthony Harnden from the Joint Committee of Vaccination and Immunisation, and Dr. Margaret Harris from the World Health Organization. A warm welcome to you all. Professor Edwards, I'm going to start with you because you often come on this programme. You're quite calm and sanguine. Can I ask you how you're feeling tonight?
Oh, it's great. This is fantastic news. It really is. It's an amazing achievement.
Can you explain to us why this is a game changer, not just for COVID, but potentially for all vaccines?
Yeah, so this is a new type of vaccine, this mRNA vaccine. So the Moderna vaccine is very similar, and we haven't had these sorts of vaccines before. They have been in development for some time, but they haven't got through, to licensure yet until today. And I think, but there's lots of advantages of these vaccines, which is why there've been so much interest in them over the last few years. So they're kind of easier to manufacture in a sort of in a way that is replicable and so on, which is one of the very important things that the manufacturers have to do. They have to make sure that they can manufacture it in exactly the same way again and again and again and again. And the way it's manufactured, because of its novel kind of construct, it means that it's easier to do that. Most vaccines, you have to grow the virus on some cells. You have to grow some cells first, and that's difficult to do. And then you have to grow virus, and that's difficult to do because viruses kill the cells and all that sort of stuff. And then you have to somehow remove the bits of the virus that you want and purify that and use it in a vaccine. So it's all complicated and lots of things. There's lots of sort of difficult steps in all of that process. And this is much simpler, chemical process, really, rather than a biological process.
But can I ask you something? Because you heard just before Sean Marrett talking about, he called it the messenger RNA. Should people be concerned? I mean, is there any worry that that changes the DNA, or is it safer than using a bit of the virus itself?
It's safer, probably. It can't change your DNA. It can't do that. You can't go from RNA back to DNA. There's only a few viruses that can do that. Every other living organism can only go from DNA to RNA.
Yeah.
And so there's no way that it can change your DNA. There is just no mechanism for any living organism to do that.
So, Professor Harnden, that sounds like it's about as safe as we could possibly hope for. The question that you've been dealing with is how do you get it to the right places and who's on the priority list? We've had a look at that. If you were a younger man who's shielding versus an elderly person in a care home, I mean, how are you weighing up those?
I mean, these are very difficult issues to weigh up. But can I just echo John's thought? This is a pivotal moment for the UK in our collective response to this ghastly virus, and I think we should all be celebrating at the moment. These were incredibly difficult issues to weigh up, but we looked very, very carefully at all the epidemiological data that was both published and unpublished. And it was quite clear that the morbidity and mortality was so biased towards age. You are hugely more at risk the older you get. And in fact, if you look at deaths, for instance, 90% of all deaths were in 65-year-olds or above to date. And 99% of deaths will be covered by the 9 priority groups which we've outlined.
Yeah.
So of course there are going to be individuals who will be outliers and who we would love to give the vaccine given unlimited supply. But one of the great things about our country is that we have a nationalised health service. We believe in equity, we believe in fairness, and actually we believe in protecting the most vulnerable in society, and that's the route that we've taken.
Let me ask you, with your GP hat on, and also I think as a long COVID sufferer yourself, if you're hearing people saying, I've had COVID, I don't need it, what would be your answer?
Well, my answer is my own experiences. I developed COVID 3 days after my 60th birthday. With complications, and I've still got lingering effects to date, and quite surprisingly 9 months later I'm still not well. So my message without any shadow of a doubt is to get that vaccine. I have 2 elderly parents, one of which is very disabled, both over the age of 80. Yeah. My father phoned me up the other day, should I get the vaccine? Of course you should get the vaccine, Dad. It's safe, it's effective, and it's going to be a game changer.
Let me bring in Dr. Harris. And it was interesting hearing Professor Harnden talk about, the sort of the National Health Service here, of course, which we all depend on. I guess some are looking at this on a more global level, and they're worried that Britain might have jumped the gun. What would you say to them?
I would say that we are confident that the British authorities have looked fully. You've got very good regulatory authorities. And I think the important point was I heard the chairperson describing how they'd been working in parallel. There's been an enormous amount of work from the scientists to the regulators to everybody to do this work and really do it in a really efficient way to ensure we get to this stage so quickly. So it's not about cutting corners, it's about working
Dr.
much
Harris,
better.
I'm so sorry, we're having complications with your line right now. We're going to try and get this up because this is vital stuff and we don't want to miss it, but we're just maybe going to call you back, dial you up again and make sure that we get a bit of a clearer picture. Can I go back to you, Professor Edmonds? And one of the things that we know is that we're going to start with the Pfizer-BioNTech. Hopefully we'll get the vaccine from Oxford University, the AstraZeneca 1-2. Now, there's a big disparity in how those are being charged. So the Pfizer one is being charged at sort of proper market rates and the Oxford one isn't. Do you think that is a complication in terms of how it's rolled out?
I think it's a bit of a complication, of course, to deliver 2 different vaccines, and that will be difficult, and we'll have to monitor very carefully the effectiveness and safety of both of those vaccines, and indeed the Moderna and others when they come on stream as well. And so we'll have to know, because we'll have to try and, although this has been, this first one, the BioNTech Pfizer one has been approved for use, we still have to monitor it very carefully to make sure that it is genuinely safe and it is genuinely effective. And so we'll have to be able to work out for each person what vaccines they got and when they got them in order to properly monitor their safety and effectiveness. But we can do that. We have mechanisms to do that here in this country. We've got very good systems, very good electronic health records. So we can do this sort of thing, and we've got lots of experience doing it.
Professor Hunter, we heard the PM say there are immense logistical challenges tonight. Now, in terms of the sort of rollout and how you get it and how it's stored and everything, I mean, a lot has been discussed on that already. What would you expect when it arrives in this country? Are we going to work solidly through Christmas? I mean, would you expect GPs to have their surgeries open and the places, whether it's football stadiums or, garages or village halls or whatever, would those be going right the way through the holidays now? Is that the only way that we get this
Well, I would hope so. I must say that I'm not involved in the logistics of the delivery of the vaccine. That's NHS England and the devolved nations. But I am involved in the responsibility to delivery for my own primary care practice. And I know that primary care are going to step up to the plate here. I know that if we can get the hold of the vaccine...
You're going to be working all the way through the Christmas holidays?
We will work whatever we need to make sure that our patients are vaccinated, without any doubt at all. Now the logistic challenges are quite enormous with this particular vaccine, but as John says, there's others that are coming on board.
Yeah.
And as soon as we in primary care get the green light to go ahead, we will be well organised, we will be well set up, and we will marshal the use of experience of people that are experienced in mass immunisation programmes. For instance, Emily, we immunise 15 million people a year for the flu.
Yeah.
Which is a fifth of what we have to do now. Okay, we have to give 2 vaccines for this particular vaccine, but it's possible, it's feasible, and I think I speak on behalf of all my GP colleagues to say we want to embrace this. We want to protect our patients.
Yeah.
We want to be able to deliver the best system that we can for them.
Let me go to Margaret Harris, and I'm sorry about the problems we had earlier. I guess the question that I was trying to ask is the difference between the UK having it before developing countries and how that works. Do you believe it's ethical for pharmaceutical companies who've benefited from taxpayer cash to profit from the life-saving vaccine? Or do you think that in the way that the Oxford vaccine is being rolled out, at cost price, everyone should be giving up their patents at this point and saying this is something global that we need to do for each other?
Well, we actually have a mechanism called the COVAX facility, which enables the wealthier countries to, in fact, do that decent but fair thing to ensure that every country around the world gets it at the same time. So what that involves really is the wealthy countries paying the cost price, but the countries that don't have those resources being supported. So, and the aim of this is to ensure then that everybody will get at the same time. We've allocated 3% to each country, sort of 3% of their population, in order to, again, get it to the most vulnerable very, very quickly. Okay. So, indeed, there are mechanisms, and I believe they will come into action, and we will see this happen, and it's the first time we've ever done it as humanity. It's quite extraordinary.
Thank you all very much indeed. Thanks for joining us.